The New York Times, if you want to get off their email list, they want you to get off their email list. They're not going to try to trick you into staying on. But yeah, I think a lot of other brands out there don't understand, how damaging this is to your brand reputation. And honestly, it's not even about canned spam or getting a fine from the government. It's about what it's doing to the relationship of trust with the people on your email list who you're trying to have a relationship with, because relationships are what drives purchases. And this kind of stuff doesn't lead to a good relationship. And not only are you going to have a bad experience, you're going to tell your friends like me and everyone who's listening to the podcast about that bad experience.
Welcome to Endless Coffee Cup, a regular discussion of marketing news, culture, and media for our complex digital lifestyle. Join Matt Bailey as he engages in conversation to find insights beyond the latest headlines and deeper understanding for those involved in marketing. Grab a cup of coffee, have a seat, and thanks for joining.
Well, hello, dear listener, and welcome to another edition of the Endless Coffee Cup. We've got a returning guest with us today, one of our more popular guests, Gene Jennings, can I say, Gene, the email guru. I love talking with Gene, and I love talking to email. Gene, how are you doing today?
Oh my goodness. Well, after that lovely introduction, Matt, I'm blushing. But thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always fun talking with you, and anytime I can talk email, I get excited about it. So, thanks for inviting me today.
Hey, you are very welcome. And what prompted this is I saw a post that you made about holiday emails, and of course I'm like, when we started talking, it was October. I'm like, yes, we've got to talk holiday emails because it's that time of the year where, strangely enough, catalogs are showing up and the holiday emails are starting up. And what better time to talk about this? And so we're going to get this wrapped up and produced as soon as possible because it is so relevant.
That would be great because it is that time of year. I actually call this time of year the nods of holiday.
Oh.
You've heard of the Ides of March?
Oh, yes.
So this is the nods of holiday. And the reason that is that the last 2 weeks in November, which is where I get the N-O in nod, and the first week in December, which is where I get the D in nod. For most companies, this is when they get about half of their revenue for the holiday season, just in these 3 weeks,
Wow.
Which is a lot if you think about it, because, for most of my clients, holiday starts in September. Some people start in August, but I like to start in September, and it goes through about the middle of December. So that's like 10 or 12 weeks.
Wow.
So to think about the fact that, for instance, the client I worked with last year, in these 3 weeks, we generated 45% of total campaign revenue and 40% of the sales.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Gearing up for that short amount of time. That's unreal. Let me ask, when does the planning start for that campaign?
Well, you really want to think about holiday overall.
Mm-hmm.
So really, you should start your holiday planning while it's still really hot out and you're spending your weekends at the pool. Like June, July-ish.
Right.
That's when you really want to start thinking about holiday. July, August. Like I said, typically with my clients, we start in September. So if you're not thinking of it by August 1st, you're probably a little bit late with how normal production schedules go of 6 to 8 weeks. And you want to have time to do all the analysis. Whenever I work with a new client, we always take a look at what they did last year to identify what worked, what didn't work, what things we want to continue, what things we want to tweak, what things we want to test. So there's a lot of analysis that goes in before you're even ready to write a creative brief for a specific email.
Yeah, we used to joke, we would have clients or not clients, but potential clients call our agency around the September, October timeframe looking for holiday help. And it got to be our stock response was, oh, next year's holidays? Because, yeah, everyone else is already in motion and you're trying to start way too late if you're just thinking about it now.
Exactly. And you know what the great thing about this time of year is, this early November timeframe? If you've started holiday in September, you've got some learnings you can take a look at. When you do your plan, you want to plan for the whole holiday season. You don't want to just plan for the first piece, but this early November time period, which is what we're in as I'm speaking to you, is the perfect time to take a look at what you've done and then tweak going forward. Because even though you have a set plan, you want to make sure that you're able to pivot. You want to make sure that if something's working, you can do more of it. If something you thought would work isn't working, that you can do less of it. So this is the perfect time, this early November timeframe, to reevaluate everything you're doing. Not that you're going to change your whole plan, but you're going to tweak it, like I said, especially for these nods of holiday, the last 2 weeks in November and the first week in December.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm starting to watch now who's sending the emails and how often they're coming. And I noticed there are some retailers I only see their emails this time of the year. But yet, I'm gonna ask you, like, I've got you for an hour, so I'm asking you.
I'm all yours, Matt.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
all yours. Just don't tell your wife.
Well, here's my question. Is that a bad thing? Because part of it, one specific retailer, they sell chess sets, which my daughter loves chess. She's very good at it. I've probably gotten her 10 chess sets over the years. And I got that email and I said, you know what? It makes sense to get this now because the rest of the year, I'm not really thinking about it. And now it makes sense. So, like, just that one or two during these knots, as you said, does that make sense, or is it something that someone should be doing throughout the year?
Actually, it totally makes sense. One thing that smart companies do during the holidays is they go deeper into their subscriber file with their mailings. So for instance, years ago, it was a long time ago, I worked with Hasbro for a couple years. They were actually my first big name brand client, so I have a lot of love for Hasbro. We had a bunch of people on the list that were inactive. They hadn't clicked, they hadn't opened in a while. And what we did when I started working with them is we actually knocked back the frequency on those people, because when we thought it through, it didn't necessarily make sense to be bombarding them every month because they just didn't seem to be interested.
Right,
But
yeah.
if you're a toy company, you have three big seasons: pre-Christmas, obviously, pre-holiday, pre-summer, and pre-Easter. Those were like our three big times for sales. So what we would do is those inactives, we would pull them out and dust them off during those big times, and we would start mailing them again. And we might mail them on the same frequency as the regular file during those periods. Typically, we mailed them a little less frequently than the rest of the file, and then we would watch. And if people came back to life, we would up the frequency, maybe put them into the active list. If not, they'd stay on the inactives. But yeah, there's a lot of people, just like you, with chess sets, with other products. You know, for me, I don't have any children, but I have lots of nieces and nephews and kids' friends who call me Aunt Jean. So I buy a lot of toys this holiday season. I don't buy a lot of toys the rest of the year.
Right.
So that really is a smart way to handle folks like you and I, where there's a time of the year when we're interested in these products. There's other times when we're not. So that is actually a really smart thing for companies to do. It brings us to something else, though, that I wanted to talk about, which is when you start mailing those inactives and you're not mailing them the rest of the year, which is a good practice, suddenly your audience is a little different on your list. So those inactives who are only mailed during key times, less frequently, may not behave like the rest of your list does.
Right.
So that's why it's important, as I said, in early December to take stock of where you are and see how things are performing. It's also a good time to do some A/B split testing, because there's this conventional wisdom that you should never A/B split test during your key times. Just don't do it. And I'll tell you, I strongly disagree with that after years and years in the industry, because holidays are just a different time. You're going deeper into your file. They aren't necessarily the same people on your list. The needs are a lot different during holiday for most people than for e-commerce companies than they would be during the rest of the year. So it's actually really important to test around this time, as long as you do two things. One is you have to test using scientific methods. So you don't just test willy-nilly. Oh, let's just make the call to action buttons purple and see what happens.
Right.
That's not a hypothesis. You want to have a sound idea for why what you're testing will boost performance is the first piece. And then the second thing is, whatever change you're making to boost performance needs to be something that you can implement for future email marketing messages during the holiday campaign. So for instance, last year, again, conventional wisdom out the window, we did a 3-way A/B split test with our first Black Friday email.
Wow.
Now, a lot of marketers would go, oh my God, are you crazy?
Right, yeah.
But no, we were not crazy, because we had our control. We had test A, we had test B. Test B generated a 38% lift in revenue generated per email sent,
Wow.
which is pretty good, but let me tell you about Test A. The lift on Test A was even higher. The lift on Test A was, hang on, I've got it right here, 73%.
Wow.
So basically, if we had mailed our control throughout Black Friday, there were 5 Black Friday emails.
Right.
This was a design change that was easy to implement across all of those emails. We would have left a lot of money on the table. So
No
after
kidding.
that first send where we did the test, we found out that Test A did better than the control. We made that design change for sends 2 to 5. And you can do the math on that, a 73% increase in revenue per email over 4 sends. We're talking some real money here.
That's beautiful. I love that is absolutely gorgeous. I love that type of thinking. And of course, those are sexy numbers right there. That is just amazing. But I love what you're doing because if you're going to test, you want to test with the most amount of users or the most amount of data that you can gather. And that first Black Friday email is going to be the most you're going to be sending. So it makes sense scientifically, as you said, we're going to test the biggest user pool available. But something else, and this is interesting because I got this question yesterday in one of my trainings, and it was, how do we analyze a campaign after it's run so that we can make changes for the next campaign? And I challenged that in the training, that why are you waiting until after the campaign to analyze and make changes? And it goes to the heart of exactly what you talked about right there, is you planned the test, and based on the test, we're going to change the rest of the campaign. And for some reason, I just encounter this a lot, that marketers feel we have to wait till the campaign's over to get data, rather than let's change when we see opportunity, when we know we need to. There seems to be an aversion to midstream analysis and change.
Yeah, I mean, some of it depends on how big your lists are. Now, I'm very lucky. My clients have very large lists, so we can get statistically significant results with 1 send. If you have a small list, you may have to test one thing over a couple sends to get results, but I think there's a lot of things going on. One thing I see with email marketers, I have yet to meet an email marketer who isn't overwhelmed and overworked, especially during holiday. I told you before we got on the call, I'm in a baseball cap because I was up last night working on holiday for a client.
Right.
So I slept in instead of doing my hair this morning. But that's, I think, the first thing that goes on. Email marketers are just in general overwhelmed, and so when it gets to holiday, they're twice as overwhelmed. And so, I see a lot of companies where they don't ever take a look at results and reports. It's all about the send.
Yeah.
Because they're so busy. But it's so important to look at the results. It's funny because when I start working with clients, that's one of the things that I really focus on are the numbers. And like you said, getting the numbers quickly, because you can usually get email results within 24 hours, at least directional results to tell you which way to go. And just taking the time and having the time to do it. So I think a lot of it is time, and I think a lot of people, email marketing, it's not difficult to make it profitable because it's so inexpensive on the front end.
Right.
But the problem is it's a double-edged sword. People are like, oh, I'm making a profit. I'm not going to put any money into my email. Let's see if we can try to make this other channel that's not profitable. And if you think about it, that's the exact wrong way to do things, right?
Absolutely.
Because if email's profitable and you put a little more money into it, it will be a lot more profitable, just like the test that we just talked about. So, sometimes it's easier to put money at something that's working well and get better results than it is to put money on something that's not working well and try to get it to be profitable.
That is one of the first lessons I learned as a brand new, very green marketer. And of course, I'm coming from digital, and I'm talking with, a 40-year experienced catalog marketer. And we're talking about things, and I'm like, trying to explain, hey, that's not working. We could analyze that and figure out how to make it work. And he just looks at me and goes, or we could put the money into something that's already working. And he now very patiently walked me through that. And it changed my whole view of things that, yes, so much of what we do has its basis in direct marketing. And that is what a direct marketer, what's working, we throw more money there. We put more attention there because that is what is driving it. And for some reason, I think marketers are just in love with new channels.
It's
And
bright and
yeah,
it's shiny and it's sexy.
yeah,
But if you're fill in the blank, if your social media, if your search engine marketing, if your whatever isn't working, if your SMS isn't working, don't just keep throwing money at it.
right.
Put money at the things that are working and make them better.
Yeah. And I think there's a case to be made for if it's not working, A, you're probably not doing it right. B, it could be the wrong channel. But then why? And I've seen retailers do this. I've seen so many companies do this. They take money out of the campaigns that are doing well and put it, not even invest. Invest, it implies you've done some research. It's a hope-based initiative that we hope putting more money here will make it work. And there's a double-edged sword, like you talk about. Not only am I taking money away from a channel that is proven and works, but when you know your return on ad spend, for every dollar I put in, I'm making 30 or 40. If I take dollars out of that, I'm not just taking dollars out, I'm taking revenue out multiplied by the dollars I'm taking out. And so now it's not just you're exploring another channel, you're moving profit out and you will not realize that. And it's kind of basic stuff, but yet I'm running into this constantly with retailers as they try and make these decisions.
Yeah, it's really hard because, the bright, shiny stuff is very sexy and people want to be there. Throughout my career, I've been on these panels on stage where I'm on one side alone
Oh,
and there's a bunch of people on the other side, and usually they're younger than I am.
no.
And the title of the title of the session is "Email is Dead.
Right.
Long live brand new shiny sexy channel."
Yep.
And none of those shiny sexy channels have yet to unseat email as the number one channel in terms of ROI.
And you've
which,
been doing those panels for 20 years. Email's
yeah,
been dead
yeah.
every year for 20
I mean,
years.
RSS was going to kill email.
Right. Where's that?
Right?
Yep. Exactly.
So I think, there's so much to be had in email. And like I said, just because your email marketing is profitable, don't think that you've done all you can do.
No.
Put some more money into it. Do some scientific method, strategic testing. There's so much you can do if you just sort of dig in. But the other thing about it is I'm a geek. I actually love email. I mean, I was up late last night working on this for a client, and it was fun. Like, I
Yeah.
would rather do this than sit in front of the TV. And so that's the other thing I think that you really want to have. You want to have someone on your marketing team, on your email marketing team, who has passion for it.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things, the first thing that goes when people get overworked and they feel like it's all about the send and they feel banged upon. So that's another thing I try to do with my clients is really, I have so much passion and I hope that it's infectious. The idea that I can get in there and show people what they can do with email and how they can do A/B split testing and make it kind of fun. And that's the other thing I really try to do because it is such a great channel and it can be. I mean, working on holiday email marketing campaigns is just a blast.
Oh, yeah.
It is such a privilege. And like I said, I just really jam on it. I've been doing it, forever with different e-commerce companies. And it's just really fun. So you have to have that passion.
Well, it's very evident when I talk with you. And I think that you hit upon a real key there that if you're not having fun, thinking about the campaign, how is this going to happen? How can we test it? Coming up with all the variables, if you're not enjoying it, then it's time to look for something else. Because if you don't have that passion, that fun attitude of approaching it, then it's going to be reflected in the quality of the campaign. You're going to be going through the motions rather than looking at this like you. I mean, when I'm teaching, when I'm developing curriculum, and I'm like, I am loving it. How can I teach this in a different way that someone will remember it? How can we say this or present it? I love doing that, and I can't imagine doing anything else. And that's, I think, what it takes to really be amazing at what you do.
Yeah, I'd say that's a big part of my success, and I feel lucky that I like something that I'm good at that people are willing to pay for. Um, but yeah, no, that's exactly it. And there's so many little tricks with email. I mean, the other thing that I like to play with, not only in holiday, honestly, just all the time, are what I call strategic resends. So strategic resend, a lot of people do resends. They just take the same email and they mail it to everybody again. Nothing wrong with that, but a strategic resend is a little different. So
Hmm.
what makes it strategic? So the first thing is I'm targeting the people who are most likely to respond, which are the people who got very close to a purchase but didn't make one, which means people who clicked but didn't buy. So right off the bat, that's going to be a small portion of that initial send. I mean, usually click-through rates are like 3%, give or take.
Right.
So it's a small portion. So that's the first piece, is just sending to those people. The reason for that is they have a high propensity to buy because they were definitely interested. The other thing is when we do these, those people rarely are going to unsubscribe or report you as spam
Hmm.
because the email is completely relevant to them.
Yes.
The second key is to deploy that resend within a week to 10 days of the initial send, so that the memory of being interested in clicking through is fresh in their mind. The third key, which sounds crazy, is not making any changes to that email.
Ha.
Because whatever was in that email the first time got them to click. They were
Hmm.
this close to a purchase. So when you send it again, typically not only do they click again, but a big percentage of those folks buy. So for instance,
Wow.
last holiday, we did resends for almost every send that we did. We had an average lift from the initial send in RPE of 1,380%. The median lift was 953%.
With the same email.
With the same email. Now, again, the key is that it's a small audience, so it's not like 10 times the revenue of the initial send,
Right.
but
Right.
if you don't do that strategic resend to that small group of
Yeah.
people who is so close to the purchase, you're just leaving that money on the table.
Wow. Because like your conventional wisdom would say, I'm sending the same email. They would think to themselves, I've seen this before. But yeah, numbers don't lie. I mean, that's interesting. Yeah, because I would be one of those. But like, we can't send the same thing. That's but that make wow. That is amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, a highly qualified group of people that they qualified themselves. But yeah, that blows my mind. The same exact email would push them over the edge on a second send.
The nice part about that is the resources it takes to do strategic resends are almost nothing. I
Right.
mean, it's very easy to pull the list of people who clicked on the last email. It's very easy to dedupe it against people who bought.
Hmm.
And it's very easy to tee up that exact same email again and send it to that list of people who clicked on the first one. So
Wow.
that's the other nice thing about strategic resends. The investment is very small, but the return is significant.
Yeah. Great. That is amazing. One other thing, I mean, as we were comparing email to different channels, one of the things that I absolutely love about email is there is a clearer attribution path to email because it is so much more of a closed system than many of your other channels, which rely on third parties or other platforms, third party platforms, that type of thing. And so, one of the things that I've heard over the past year or two is more drive to attribution. And in some ways, it's near impossible. But yet, when we want to look at probably your best method of measuring attribution in terms of marketing, email's right there.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like a direct one to one.
Yeah. So most email uses last click attribution,
Hmm.
which is the easiest to measure. I've had people argue and debate me about how it's not an absolute measure of attribution, which I don't disagree with. I
Hmm.
mean, anytime we click on an email, there's a good chance that we've had another email about that, or we saw a display ad. There's so many things that go into a person's decision to purchase.
Right, right.
Now, that said, a lot of those things are very hard to track,
Hmm.
especially, if you're a smaller customer or you don't have a whole ton of time. So last click is a pretty good relative sense of what's driving it. So yeah, taking a look at that. The other thing about attribution is if you don't understand the attribution modeling that your company's using, you should look into it and understand it. I did a project for Verizon a bunch of years ago all around attribution. When you're doing an attribution model, it's typically last click, but then there's questions around that. So how long after that last click until the purchase do I get credit for?
Right.
If the click happened a day before the sale, do I get credit? Probably. If it happened a week before the sale and that was my last click before the sale, do I get credit? Most likely. If that last click was 2 months before the sale, do I get credit? Some models do, some don't. The other thing to ask is, do you get credit just for the product that was promoted in that email, or do you get credit for the whole cart? Which is another interesting question. So there's all sorts of different models. So if you don't know how your company is tracking attribution, you should ask, because it's an important thing to understand, and it could really change how you do your email marketing. If you know that your attribution window is only a week, you're probably going to want to be touching people at least once every 7 days to make sure you get credit for these sales. If your attribution model is a month, then probably you don't have to be as aggressive about it.
Yeah. And I think part of this too, and it's a great discussion when you start looking at different attribution and things there. And one of the things I've really been pushing back on is especially the display in the attribution path, because just look at the click rates of email versus display. Email has much higher click-through rates than display ads. And to me, this gets to I'm going to invoke Marshall McLuhan. The medium is the message. People trust email more than they trust the display ad. And so if I'm looking at attribution, I would be seeing that because display gets such a low click-through rate, I don't think that's an effective means. But also, here's the other part of it, of what came out in a lot of this Facebook dump, is they will tell you that you had a view. However, Facebook's definition of a display view is greater than 0 pixels and greater than 0 seconds. How am I supposed to give that attribution with that definition? Whereas email, I've got to click. I know they saw it. There's strengths and weaknesses when we start talking about attribution. It's just not a clear cut. We know that was involved in the process.
Yeah, I've worked with companies where, email needed to get a click, but if there was a display ad impression, that got credit, partial credit or full credit, even if it happened previous to the final click. So there's, like I said, there's all different ways that companies do it. Mm-hmm. It's just important to understand how your company does it so you can understand what's going on. It's almost like understanding the rules of the game so you can play it right. Right.
Not only the rules, but the definitions.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find a lot of companies internally don't agree on definitions. Then you put in an agency, which has their own set of definitions. And then, like I'm trying to tell everybody now what Facebook's definition of a view is, so that you understand when you talk about a view, how little it means. And that's if a human viewed it. We're not even, talking about, bots and all that. So we need to know what the platform definition is so that we can adjust what we think, because if I'm presenting to a C-suite and I talk about a view or an impression, they are interpreting that based on their own experience. When they think display ad, they think that big old banner in the top of the page that everybody sees, and it takes some level of education that, no, that's not always what it is.
Yeah, that's always been an issue just in the marketing world. I mean, I remember early on we had opt-in and we had double opt-in, and I'll never forget speaking to someone at a conference, God bless them, and they said, well, we practice double opt-out. And I said, well, I've never heard of that. What does that mean? This was before CAN-SPAM, and they said, well, that means if you click to unsubscribe from our list, we're going to send you an email, and you need to click on that email to confirm that you really want to get off the list. Otherwise, we won't take you off. Which is, of course, why we have CAN-SPAM, but it's just so funny to me because, you hear double opt-out and you're like, you mean double opt-in? And he's like, no, I mean double opt-out. You have to tell us twice to take you off the list or we won't do it. Which, of course, you could never do now with CAN-SPAM, thank goodness. But terminology is very tricky, and people bend it to their own means.
If you are a regular listener of Endless Coffee Cup, well, I love coffee. If you are listening for the first time, then the name of the podcast should be a big clue. I love conversation, and I think that we have a lot to learn from each other if we only take the time to sit and talk over a cup of coffee. Maybe we'll come to a resolution, maybe not, but at least we've learned from each other. It's in this spirit that I'm happy to announce a regular sponsor of the Endless Coffee Cup, a coffee sponsor. In Care of Coffee is a coffee company that is unique in the market. They are directly tied to the communities that produce coffee and ensure that the proceeds go to the coffee farmers, the local producers, and their communities. There are no middlemen or markups. The proceeds from the sales go directly to the communities that work so hard to bring us the enjoyment of a great cup of coffee. Go to incareofcoffee.com, follow the link in the notes, and use the code ENDLESS to get 10% off your order. Again, that's the discount code ENDLESS to get 10% off your order. I'm enjoying the whole bean Huehuetenango coffee today. Please support our sponsor and know that your support goes directly to the farmers, producers, and communities that help power us here at the Endless Coffee Cup Podcast. Yes, and I'm about to report a company because I don't even know how I got on this list. I hit unsubscribe. It showed me two options, and it was basically I had to check them, but it was worded in a way that was just kind of odd. And then I started looking at the page more in depth, and I noticed there were other drop downs that were condensed. And when I opened them, I'm on 20 different, lists. And, I was furious by the time I looked at that. And it was all presented and written negatively in order to confuse. And it was probably the worst opt-out experiences I've ever seen. But oh my goodness. And that's why I'm not laughing, I'm crying, because it's still, that mentality is still there.
Well, and the good news is, I tend to work with name brand companies. I tend to work with bigger companies, and they don't do things like that because they know that their reputation's at stake.
Right.
The New York Times, if you want to get off their email list, they want you to get off their email list. They're not going to try to trick you into staying on. But yeah, I think a lot of other brands out there don't understand how damaging this is to your brand reputation. And honestly, it's not even about canned spam or getting a fine from the government. It's about what it's doing to the relationship of trust with the people on your email list who you're trying to have a relationship with, because relationships are what drives purchases. And this kind of stuff doesn't lead to a good relationship. And not only are you going to have a bad experience, you're going to tell your friends like me and everyone who's listening to the podcast about that bad experience. Now, we're not going to mention brands here, I'm sure, but it's damaging. And I think that's another problem with email. People don't understand that the reason you follow the standards of best practices is it's in your own best interest to protect your brand.
Right.
And when people try to get around it, it reflects poorly on you. It's actually a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think we've used this metaphor since day one. Would you do that in real life?
Yeah.
Would you prevent someone from walking out of your store in real life by making them, yes, I want to leave.
I'm sorry, I'm barricading the door. Are you sure that you want to go? I just need to make sure that you actually intended to leave.
Absolutely. Yeah, we would never think of doing that in real life.
Never do
but
that.
Digitally, it's so easy and it's a shortcut. And yeah, for some reason, things like that have just taken hold of people's imaginations, and they just develop these mazes to get out of.
Yeah, it's desperation, and if you're
Wow.
if you're that desperate, then you need to change something about your program, because companies that are doing email marketing well are not that desperate.
Wow, that is powerful. That is a powerful observation. Wow. Okay, so we have gotten way off track on holidays. So,
Let's go back to talking about Christmas in November.
yeah, let's do that. That is holidays. So I see a lot of articles about when to send emails. Is there credence to you've got to send on the Friday after Thanksgiving? You have to send this, or, some of these where you have to send on this day at this time. How much stock should we put into that type of research or advice?
So all of those articles about the best day and time to send email,
Yeah.
and they used to be published a lot. They'd be like, Thursdays at 3 o'clock is the best time to send
Yes.
email. So of course, we would all of us who were speaking at that time would get questions about that. And I would say, you know what, here's the thing. If everyone who reads that article follows that advice, the best time to send email is any time but Thursdays at 3. Because people's inboxes are going to be bombarded.
Right.
So, as far as best day and times to send in general, it really, you want to look at your audience and figure that out. And you can do testing. We did last year for holiday, we started with 2 sends a week, and then we were going to add in a third send. So our 2 sends a week, I think it was Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then we're going to add in a third send, and we actually did testing to see whether Monday, Wednesday, or Friday was a better day. I think that's what it was. But we actually sent the same email, different days at the same time, and one was the clear winner. So that was our third day. So you can actually test into which days are best. You can also test into which times are best in general. As far as holiday and things like Black Friday is so much bigger than any one retailer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a thing, man.
Oh, yeah.
And so you really want to make sure that you don't miss out on that, because there's kind of a shared psychology about it. Good deals, everyone's shopping. I haven't been a Black Friday shopper for years, but back in the day, I remember getting up early and going to Macy's for that coat that I wanted that was going to be on super deep discount before 8 a.m., But you want to be there because everyone else is there and that's what they're focused on. It was interesting last year because in addition to Black Friday, we had an Amazon Prime Day during the holiday season.
Oh.
I believe that was in October, if I'm not mistaken. And it's interesting because they announced it just a week or two before, but we knew that it was going to happen. So we actually developed a campaign for it because our feeling was Amazon is arguably one of the biggest retailers out there, if not the biggest. And so if people are being made aware from them that it's time to shop, it's time for the deals, it's Amazon Prime Day, we wanted to provide a similar experience in our emails to be like, hey, it's not just about Amazon. We're going to give you deals too right now. So you want to make sure that you jump on the boat at those times when kind of the world is thinking about shopping and the world is looking for discounts. I think with Black Friday, as I mentioned with my client last year, we did 5 emails. One of the biggest mistakes I see clients making around things like those limited time sales is they don't send enough emails, which sounds really crazy, but I've talked to people, who are like, well, we send one when it starts and we send one to tell them it's about to end, and that's it. And the problem with that is that's 2 emails. Average open rates on emails pre-Apple mail privacy protection, which is a whole other tangent, but pre-MPP,
Yes.
open rates were running on average 25 or 30%. So think this through for a minute. If I send 2 emails and my average open rate for both is 25 or 30%, let's say it's 30, even if completely different people open both of those emails, that's only 60% of my audience that's seen my message. And we know from experience that there's a lot more overlap than that. You have people who love your brand who are going to open every email. Sending just 2 emails for a 4 or a 5 or a 6 day sale, which Black Friday, typically now it's Black Friday plus Cyber Monday and sometimes it's extended, it's just not enough. So with a limited time sale like that, I tend to send every day. The other thing you want to think about is urgency is a great way to drive sales. So you send the first email that the sale has started. You send a reminder that it's happening. You send a note that says it's about to end. Then you send a note that say, hey, it was so popular, we've extended it another day. Then you send an email that says, hey, actually, this is really actually the end. So the idea is by sending those emails and making them work together, again, that's 5 emails. If your average open rate is 30%, you have a much greater chance of hitting a higher percentage of your audience. And I've done studies on this. We call it reach. And there's open reach and there's click reach, which is over a course of a bunch of emails, what percentage of your audience opens or clicks on at least one. And so that's what you want to do. And there's a point where more emails aren't going to increase your open or click reach. That's too many. It's kind of a bell curve. But that's why I think a lot of people, especially for limited time campaigns, they don't send enough emails. And again, they're leaving money on the table, which I hate to do.
Right. Wow. I feel like I'm getting the inner secrets here because this is because some things, we and there's a lot. I hate to say, there is a lot of marketing that is gut instinct rather than everyone says they want to be data driven, but to get the data and like you're saying, we're sending every day. Look at the data, but what prevents that data from actually being gathered in the first place is we can't send every day. They'll get tired of us. They'll unsubscribe. It's that fear of actually doing it to get the data and see if it'll work in the first time. So I love that you're not only bringing the practical, here's what to do, but here's what it does. And I love it. You can't argue with the data. It's great. It's
Yeah,
great.
I had a client years ago for Black Friday. So they were one of those shopping sites
Hmm.
that watched all of the fashion brands and would let you know when things were on sale. For Black Friday, they sent 7 or 8 emails over the course of that single day
Oh, yeah.
because it was like special alerts. Hey, we just saw that Everlane has a sale on this and it's the best price we've seen all year. Hey, here's another email. We just saw that Madewell is selling this and this is the lowest price we've seen all
Wow.
year. And some people go, "Oh my god, 7 emails in one day, that is too many." It totally made sense for the content they were sending. If they had waited and put them all in an email at the end of the day, it wouldn't have been as effective. Things would have been sold out. So you want to think about the content you're sending and how you can make it useful to the subscriber. They did not see an uptick in unsubscribes. They did not see spam complaints because the content was relevant and they knew their audience. Their audience wanted that.
Well, their audience is probably sitting there on Black Friday doing all their shopping online. And so getting those along with all your shopping confirmations and receipts and all that, oh my goodness, that is such a perfect application. That's
Yeah, I mean,
wonderful.
it's almost like a customer service, right?
Yeah.
Oh, here it is on sale, and it's you're looking at these, you're like, oh wow, that would be a great gift for Pam. Oh, let me go get that. Oh, that would be a great gift for Mark. Let me go get that.
Right.
So it's almost like it's a customer service because they're giving you ideas and they're giving you discounts at the same time.
Wow. Very, very cool. All right. So you brought this up, and it's probably time to bring this up, and that's Apple's privacy protection. Okay, that tells me, okay, we can move on. That
No, no, no,
sigh
no, no,
told
no,
me
no, no,
everything
no,
I need
no,
to
no,
know.
no. It's a really important topic, and it's the thing that's been keeping email marketers awake at night since it was announced back in June. And I think it's really interesting because my thinking on it has really evolved since the beginning.
That's good because I think that's typical of any major change. There's the initial, I hate it. And then months later, I think there's a softening and even maybe okay, more than just an acceptance, maybe an appreciation. But it sounds like you've gone through those stages of grief.
I've gone through the stages of grief. So, initially we were all very concerned. For those of you who aren't familiar, Apple's mail privacy protection was launched with iOS 15, which was available to download in September. Basically, what it does is it's a pop-up, and it basically says, we want to help protect your privacy. Click on this, and we will make sure that marketers can no longer see, whether you open their emails or not, where you are when you open their emails. There's another initiatives called like Hide My Email, but the biggest one was the impact to open rates. So basically by clicking on that and the way it's worded, it really sounds like they're protecting you from something dangerous.
Hmm.
Then what they do is they will basically, the way that we track opens is through an invisible pixel image in the email. So if you enable Apple's mail privacy protection, what they're doing is they are downloading all the images in the email before you ever open it or see it, and that way it looks like you opened it even if you didn't.
Hmm.
So initially our thing was, wow, open rates are going to explode. And it's not just Apple email addresses, it's anyone who's opening email on an Apple device. So if you're using the native phone app on your iPhone, even if you have a Gmail account that you're pulling into that native app on the iPhone or any other account, it would impact it.
Wow. Yeah.
So initially we were all anticipating that open rates were going to blow up. We weren't going to be able to tell which of these people really opened and which were the images were just cached, and that was going to make open rates unusable. And that was kind of the sky is falling view. There was a lot of talk about ESPs parsing out Apple opens from other opens so you could still get a clean read on your other opens. But again, that gets much more difficult because it's not just an Apple email address. It's any email address that's open on an Apple device, and they could cache it on the Apple device. Then if you opened it on a non-Apple device, it would still trigger an open there. So the whole thing gets very confusing. What ended up happening typically when Apple rolls something like this out, it is rolled out to the entire population in a 6 or 8 week period. So they don't sort of say, okay, now everybody download it today, because that would crash their servers. They're
Right.
like, okay, you guys get it today, a different group gets it tomorrow. They stagger the rollout. What we've seen here is that staggering is much, much slower than it's been in previous version updates. We don't really know why that is. We think it might be because if you can imagine caching all these images, this is pretty new and it's a lot of storage space. So
Right.
it's been a slower rollout than we anticipated. As a result, some of us are seeing slight upticks in open rates, but we haven't seen anything dramatic yet. It's interesting because the open rate, when we could start tracking opens, which was back around the 2000 timeframe, I remember it. There was a lot of controversy about open rates. There were
Right.
actually nights at conferences late at the bar when it was closing, when people would almost get into fisticuffs over open rates.
Hmm.
They're a B shit metric. Don't use them. No, they're valuable. I can remember one night we were separating people in the lobby because we really thought they were gonna start duking it out. So it's funny because we went from that in 2000 to now them being pretty much accepted. Although anyone who really works understands there's always this margin of error in open rates.
Yes.
The reason is, and the reason people were against them at the beginning is that it involves that pixel. So you could read an entire email with images disabled
Yep.
10 times and it wouldn't count as an open.
Right. Yep.
You could breeze by it in your browse in your preview pane with images enabled and it would count as an open even though you didn't look at it.
Hmm.
So that margin of error has always been there. So my thinking on how we're going to handle this, especially since the rollout has been so gradual, I think we are just going to assume that there is just now a higher margin of error in those open rates and just move forward and keep using them, because the way that we got around that margin of error, back in the 2000s when it was first launched, was by saying, if you are mailing to your list again and again and again, the margin of error should be about the same for every send,
Right.
because you're mailing to the same people.
Yes.
So if you use that logic with Apple MPP, even though the number is going to be higher, it's not an absolute figure for opens, it's still a relative figure, the margin of error is higher. But again, if you're sending to the same list, your house list, over and over and over, which is what you should be doing, that margin of error should be about the same for all of your sends. So open rates, as they always have been, are still a decent directional metric, not absolute, but directional to see
Yes.
what's going on. So I think that we all thought the sky was falling and that we're actually going to move forward and just use them like we always have, understanding that larger margin of error. I could be proven wrong. This is a pretty kind of controversial stance right now, contrarian view, but I honestly, I can see a world where that's just how we handle this.
I love the contrarian view. That is, I have been accused of being contrarian, which I thoroughly disagree with. But that
So yeah,
is
so that was probably a longer answer than you wanted about Apple MPP, but
no. In my training, I mean, I tell people, open rate is muddy. It's a muddy metric.
yeah,
Cl-
always has been.
Yeah, because my mantra is if it's clickable, it's trackable.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I focus on, is if it's clicked, it's tracked. Open is muddy because I think of my email client. I'm using Outlook, which naturally, if you are not added as a trusted sender, naturally all the images are blocked. But and I've realized that there are times where I've got someone sending me something. I'm like, oh, I haven't added them to my trusted sender yet, and it's probably been a year or two or something like that. And so you're relying on, and I think sometimes maybe we attribute more conscious decision making on the part of our recipients than there actually is. People are people. When I'm looking at email, it is a functional. I'm there to accomplish something and get out. I'm trying to clean that inbox. I'm not looking at providing feedback to retailers.
Exactly. I think that's the other thing marketers get mixed up about. We care more about these emails than the people who are getting them do.
Yes.
I've had marketers like, oh my gosh, there was a typo in the second sentence in the fourth paragraph. Should I send a an oops email? Should I let them? And I'm like, no, just let it go, because probably very few people notice that. Now, if you had a link that didn't work, that is a reason to send an oops email. But yeah, we care a lot more about all this than any of the recipients do. And that's a good thing on the one hand. It's why we're good at our jobs. But we have to remember that sometimes when we're thinking about, why didn't they open it? Don't they love us anymore? They're not thinking about that.
Oh, okay. So I have a non-holiday topic that I want to throw at you, and this is a curveball. I completely. So, here's the line of thought. You brought up misspelling. I was looking at someone's campaign and saw like they had one campaign that was like really far and above the open rates, the response, things like that. And it was because they had a horribly misspelled word in the subject. And and their question was, should we do this more often? And I said, okay, now you're thinking like machine learning. Because machine learning would say,
Right.
if we put a misspelling here, it increases the goal, which is opens and clicks. And so let's do this again. Which leads me to the question: AI writing subject lines, writing emails. What are I keep making these sighs come out of me.
I'm sorry, Matt. I'm sorry.
Dear listener, this is not on video. We're on video so that we can watch each other during this. And if
Yeah.
you could see the reactions of her face, the demeanor, the shoulders went down, the sigh came out. I feel like I'm beating Jean up here because like
I'm really sorry. I'm like I said, I'm a little overtired, so I'm not necessarily at my best.
well, I told you this is coming out of left field, but
That's
the
okay. I
the
can handle this
misspelling
one.
got me on to what are you seeing with AI? I know there are people that are like cheerleading this. AI is going to transform everything. It's going to do all our work for us, which contrarian, I'm very, very skeptical about that. And I would love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, years ago I had breakfast with one of the big wigs from one of the big ESPs, and I was pitching them that they should introduce me to their clients to help them with their email marketing because I could help with strategy, and if their clients had better results, that would make them happier. And there was a whole pitch here, and I'll never forget because he says to me, "Oh, no, we don't need anyone to do strategy. The system handles that." I'm like, "What?"
Wow.
Yeah, it's all automated. The system handles all the strategy. We would never bring you in to help the clients with strategy because the system does that. And the problem is, now this was many years ago, but as you and I know, the problem with that is that, with AI, there's got to be a person who programs it. Machine learning's a little different because the idea is there's an initial program and the machine goes off and learns on its own. But in both of those instances, I think what people don't realize is you've got to have some person setting up the AI and providing information and in order for it to work. And I've had some really mixed results with AI. I've tested. I worked with, and years ago there were a couple companies that popped up and they were the future of all this. And I'm not sure how many of them are still around, but nobody really touts them anymore. But for a
Right.
couple years ago for a client, we tested one of those AI companies, and the subject lines did not perform better than the things we were coming up with ourselves. And what I think there is, that's kind of an easy fix. It's like a quick fix for something.
Hmm.
But I have not seen a lot of success with AI. I think that, as we get more sophisticated with it down the road, we may be able to leverage it. And there are some companies that are doing some pretty slick things, but they're few and far between. And I think, most people who think AI think that that's going to solve all their problems. And it really doesn't. You need to have the knowledge, to inform the AI. And even then, I just don't think it's there yet. And I think the other thing is people don't necessarily use AI in the right ways. So, yeah, there are propensity models that I've worked with, but even those, you need to tweak them and you need to look at the results. You need to give them input. I need to help determine what the algorithm for the propensity is. So I think what people don't understand is even when you're using AI, there has to be a large human component. And I'm not talking like a junior level person, someone who actually understands the business and what's going on.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think we're there yet. I don't see a day. Hopefully there won't be a day where I'm not needed anymore and computers can just do what I do for clients with regard to strategy and creative direction and maybe split testing. I don't think I will. I don't think I will live to see that day. I hope I don't. But yeah, I don't think it's there, and I think people are starting to realize that.
I'm with you. I'm with you there because I think a lot of human behavior can be predicted. However, we're not just behavioral beings. We're emotional beings. There are words that have deeper meaning that I'm not sure a machine could really understand. And like you said, it starts with data sets. It starts with instructions. It starts with, and then I one of the fascinating reads about AI is, do you have also a multicultural component because if you're using a data set that does not include additional cultural elements, additional, input from other viewpoints, you could seriously damage your brand by creating something that it's exclusive of other people, other groups, and could be downright offensive. So that I think is what has caused people to back off of a lot of the rah rah. AI is going to solve all our problems, because I think about once or twice a year an article comes out about AI that eventually becomes racist or eventually starts creating content that's not acceptable because it's learning. And unfortunately, if it's learning from the internet, it's not. It's like a bad parent.
Yeah, that's not the input we want. No, I mean, and it goes back to exactly what you said about the misspelling. Years ago, I was working with a big brand. We sent a newsletter where the link for the first article didn't work. We sent an oops email, which basically said something in the subject line like, oops, here's the right link. And it got a huge open rate, and it got a great click-through rate, and no lie. The person in charge of that said, hey, I'm thinking we should do this every week. And I'm like, break a link? And she's like, no, let's just use like oops in the subject line like every week. And I had to explain that like it's going to wear off. If you do it every week, people are going to start to ignore it. And it's not really good marketing. It's like a gimmick.
That would fall under a
But
deceptive subject line, wouldn't it?
potentially,
Potentially.
yeah. But I mean, the thing about canned spam is they really only the government really goes after the most egregious
Yeah.
offenders. They don't really have the bandwidth to go after just everyone. So I'm not sure, but it's just again it's people looking for these shortcuts, and that's not going to work long term. It's much better to have a sound strategy to really think through and try to do it smart than try to do it shortcuts and quick and easy.
Yeah, yeah. That's like a movie using the cheap jump scare rather than actually telling a good story. So yeah, it's a great example. And unfortunately, yeah, it's the executive level. Let's do that again. that was magic. That was lightning in a can. Let's do it again.
Exactly. And that's the problem with AI, right? Oh, that worked really well. That subject line was great. Let's use it again. Well, that was a Black Friday subject line. We cannot use that again until next Black Friday.
Wow.
It just won't work.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of elements of that. So,
Mhm.
we may get there, but I don't think in the next 10 or 20 years AI is going to be taking my job nor yours. So,
I'm of the same mentality. Best thing I heard about AI as describing it is AI is like having a million interns because it does menial work quickly.
yes.
Which
Yes.
I am of the mind that a million interns is not going to do anything quickly, but I understand where it's going and what it's doing. Okay, quick questions.
Yeah.
Is there life after Christmas for an email marketer?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can breathe again after Christmas. I just remember my years of working with Hasbro. By the time Christmas came, my brain would be pretty much scrambled. I would need the next week to kind of get myself back. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, and the good thing is that, like I said, Christmas is really fun. It's fun to be an email marketer during Christmas. But by the end of Christmas, you're really happy to get back to some more, low key, normal kinds of stuff. But you can still take things that you learned in Christmas and leverage them for your regular campaigns. And one of the things that I like to do with my clients is, as soon as Christmas is over, we actually put together a PowerPoint deck that reviews what we did for the holiday. So literally every email that we sent gets at least one slide, if not two. We have the results of that send, everything from opens and clicks to conversions and revenue per email generated. We have every A/B split test that we did with all the results. We have all of the strategic resends. And the idea is, when you put it together right after the holiday, while it's all still fresh in your mind, you can also put notes at the end about next year. Hey, look at doing this. Hey, don't do that again. And it's also great because then when it gets down to June of the next year, you don't have to go pull all the data from the last holiday and figure out what to do. All you need to do is dust off this deck,
Mm.
and you're way ahead of the game. So that's another thing it's important to do after holiday. And don't make me wrong, I understand the last thing you want to do when holiday ends is go back and look at all of those holiday emails. I usually try to build that deck as we go. And then at the end of holiday, I just go back and update all the numbers because you are going to have some long tail purchasers, some things that are going to change.
Hmm.
But that is probably what you want to spend the time between Christmas and New Year's doing. And that's, low key and even though the last thing you want to do is look at another holiday email, it's better to just be done with it and set yourself or your company up for the next holiday season.
When is the last holiday email sent?
So the last holiday email is typically dependent on what the product is. So for instance, something that needs to be shipped, those last emails are usually sent sometime around the 10th or the 15th of December because it's that whole idea of getting it in time for Christmas. Now, if you're someone who offers gift cards, your Christmas season is extended, or if it's something like an online gift, like an Audible, anything that can be delivered electronically, those Christmas campaigns can actually go right up to Christmas Eve, and even I would say Christmas Day, because I don't know about you, but I see a lot of family around Christmas. I always try to have gifts for the people I'm going to see, and it never fails. There's somebody there I wasn't expecting, so it's nice to be able to run back to your bedroom and get them an Amazon gift card.
Yes.
And put it in an envelope so it doesn't look like you've forgotten them. So yeah, depending on, if you have to ship or if it's an online gift.
How is supply chain issues affecting shipping, retailers, how all this? Are you seeing that affecting this holiday season?
Yeah, it's definitely an issue. And it's an issue in two ways. It's an issue in getting things from international, which I'm not sure I realized. I mean, I guess I knew, but I'm not sure people realized how dependent they were on international organizations. Because, maybe
Right.
you're getting the product from someone in the States, but they're getting the chips from someplace else. So we have supply chain issues on that end. We also, honestly, are probably going to see supply chain issues on this side with getting things delivered. I don't know about you, but my Amazon deliveries have slowed down. It used to be the joke, right? During the pandemic, 2-day Amazon delivery became 2 week.
Right.
But you weren't going to complain because it was just the nature of it.
Right.
But yeah, I think we're running into that. I mean, one thing I think that retailers are much more prepared for it this year than they were last year. I mean, last year was just a big cluster.
Right. Right.
So this year, I with my clients, we're talking a lot more about order early before supplies run out. Don't get stuck not being able to get what you want. So it's nice because, we are always trying to introduce urgency into the marketing language. This is honest to goodness urgency.
Right. Oh, wow.
And they're hearing about it on the news and they know that we're not making it up. So I think
true.
that is driving people to buy earlier, people who can plan. But yeah, that's definitely playing in this year. But again, if you leverage it for your benefit with the urgency, I think it can actually be something that helps.
Wow. Good. Good. Well, Jean, I have thrown a lot of questions at you, and look at you. You are still you're looking great. You got through it. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Matt. And yeah, just have a happy holiday. Now that we've all talked about holiday, be safe, stay well.
All right. And Jean, how can people find you? I'll put a link in the show notes, but in case they're not on the website, how can they find you?
Sure. So I blog at my company website, which is, my company is Email Optimization Shop. My website is a little shorter. It's emailopshop.com. If you Google me, it should come up. The first name is Jean, spelled Jeanne, and the last name is Jennings. I'm also on Twitter at JeaJen, and you can follow me on LinkedIn. So yeah, just follow me there. I also am general manager of the Only Influencers community of email industry professionals. So I also write for their blog. And then I have another company I've actually been writing for, Webula, which is webula.com. And a lot of things we discussed today, but not all of them, are actually going to be in a blog post that hopefully will be published there next week.
Great.
So
Great.
yeah, definitely check that out. And if you have questions or you ever want to talk email, just reach out. I'm always happy to do it.
Fantastic. And yes, listener, I would highly recommend subscribing to Jean's emails and the email roundup. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes because it's not just Jean, it's other email professionals, and the amount of information that comes out in that is just fantastic. So it keeps you in mind of that email channel, which honestly, don't overlook it. In fact, do the opposite. invest in your email and what's happening there. Jean, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Matt. Take care.
All right, you too. Have a great holiday season. And you too, dear listener, I hope this has been a worthwhile podcast and inspiring you to take another look at your email campaign and planning for next year. All right. Thanks again, dear listener. And we'll see you again on another episode of the Endless Coffee Cup.